This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Good morning, everyone. Buongiorno. This has been a really exhilarating trip for me, and perhaps by way of conclusion, I would like to share with you the following presentation on the role of Italy in the history and destiny of the Jewish people. Italy is not an ordinary country. It is not only a beautiful country, it is not only a magnificent country. Italy, perhaps aside from Eretz Yisrael, is the most important country in our history. The Jewish community in Italy is one of the oldest communities in the diaspora, going back to the miracle of Hanukkah more than 2,000 years ago. But now I want to take you back to the year 990. It was a time when the primary academies of Torah were situated in Bavel, and it was the time of the Gaonim. The yeshivas in Bavel were under the leadership of Rav Shrira Gaon and Rav Hai Gaon, and there were a number of Rishonim. And this story is recorded by Rabbi Avram ben David, the Ravid. Now, which Ravid? This is known as Ravid the First. Okay? Now, this is important to know. There were 3 Ravids in our history. Do you know who they were? Ravid the First, born in Toledo, Spain in the year 1110. He died a martyr's death in 1180. You have Ravid the Second, who's known as Rabbi Avram of Narban, Rabbi Avram of Bezdin. Ravid the Third is Rabbi Avram of Pokiers, known as the Baal HaHasagos. The Ravid the First wrote a sefer called Sefer HaKabbalah. And in the Sefer HaKabbalah, which is a record of the transmission of the Torah, the Ravid records an episode that completely altered the direction of our history forever. There were 4 great scholars that left the port city of Bari, Italy. Who are these 4 scholars? Number 1, Rabbeinu Chushiel. Who's Rabbeinu Chushiel? Rabbeinu Chushiel is the father of Rabbeinu Hananel. Number 2, Rabbeinu Moshe, the father of Rabbeinu Chanoich. Number 3, Rabbeinu Shemaria Bar Elchanan. And the 4th, the Ravid says, I do not know his name. And they set out on a voyage to collect money for the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael. Actually, the Ravid himself says that in his opinion, they set out for Hachnasas Kala. And the waterways in those days were fraught with danger. And the Ravid records that actually this ship was captured by pirates. The pirate's name was Ibn Rumahis. He was a Moorish Spanish pirate fulfilling the wishes of the Spanish caliph. The rabbis were very smart. The rabbis knew that if they would reveal their identity, then the pirates would be able to command a very hefty ransom. So they kept their identities a secret, so the pirates would not be able to extort a heavy ransom. Rav Moshe was ransomed by the Jews of Cordova under the leadership of Chazdai ibn Shaprut. By the way, as a footnote in history, Rabbeinu Moshe had a wife who was very beautiful, and she caught wind of the fact that the pirate wanted to violate her. So she asks her husband in Lashon HaKodesh, she asks her husband, if I commit suicide, if I jump overboard, will I have a share in the world to come? And Rav Moshe said, yes, indeed. Amar Hashem, mi bashan ashiv mi metzulas yam. That if you commit suicide, you will be reconstituted. And Rabbeinu Moshe's wife killed herself. She took her life al Kiddush Hashem. Rabbeinu Moshe comes to the yeshiva in Spain, and they're learning the sugya and Yuma al kol hazah tvila. And the leader of the community was Rabbeinu Nassan. And Rabbeinu Nassan was having trouble understanding the sugya al kol hazah tvila. And Rabbeinu Moshe was able to chime in, and for probably the first time and the last time in history, Rabbeinu Nassan said I stepped down, I am no longer the Rosh Hashiva, and Rabbeinu Moshe became the de facto leader of Spanish Jewry. That was in Spain. Rabbeinu Chushiel was ransomed in Tunis, and that began the Jewish Academy in Tunis. Rabbeinu Chushiel and then his son Rabbeinu Hananel, and Rabbeinu Chushiel's illustrious Talmud Rabbeinu Nisim. So North Africa now becomes a major Torah center of scholarship. So Spain did not have a major academy until this episode. Tunis did not have a major academy until this episode. Rabbeinu Shmaria ben Elchanan was ransomed in Egypt. He establishes a major academy in Cairo. Now Egypt becomes a major Torah center. Thus began the era of the Rishonim in the year 990. This episode in history is known as the story of the Arba Shvuyim. This was the Hashgacha Pratis to move the major Torah center from Bavel to North Africa and to Europe. Friends, where did all this Torah come from? Where did all the Torah of the Rishonim come from? To the point where Rabbeinu Tam says, Ki mi bari teitzei Torah udvar Hashem me'atarant. All the Torah of the Rishonim, all the Torah we have today, came from that episode that emanated from Italy. So all the Torah of the Rishonim emanated from Italy. Let's talk about the Achronim. Scholars have made the observation that the number of first-rate Talmidei Chachamim that graced the land of Italy was far out of proportion to its size and significance in the general world. I mentioned I have an encyclopedia of more than 1,800 Chachamim who lived in Italy. The Ramchal, who the Vilna Gaon said reached the highest possible level of understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lived in Padua. The Chida, who wrote more than 70 Sfarim, printed in Livorno, in Pisa, in Mantua. An individual who the Chassam Sofer writes in Siman Kuf Nun Tes was Avi HaMikubalim. What was his name? Ramami Pano. The great Goin Maram Padva, quoted by Rama, Magen Avram, one of the pillars of Halacha. And the list goes on and on and on of Gedolim who flourished here in Italy. But it's more than just the Chachamim who lived in Italy. Because as we spoke about, the revolution of the printing press, which disseminated Torah in an unparalleled level in our history. The first Mikrais Gedolos, the first Gemaras of Talmud Bavli, Cincino Press, the Bamberg Press, the Tur, the Shulchan Aruch, all of our Svarim emanated from Italy. And this gotta be one of the greatest mysteries in our history. Why did Hashgacha Elyona orchestrate that Roiv of our Torah came from this from this country? Italy is Avi Avois Hatuma, Rome. It's the stronghold of Esav, the church, Edom, Christianity. Of all places in the world, if you would ask, which should be the last place that should be the source of Torah for the Jewish people, where Rabbeinu Tam said, Kimi bari teitzei Torah, why would Hashgacha Elyona have it that our Torah emanated from the country that we had the privilege to visit this week? Well, the ways of Hashem are mysterious, but perhaps we could offer the following thought. You know, when Yaakov Avinu dresses up as Esav and he makes the great escape, and just at that moment that he was leaving, Esav comes in, Ach Yatza Yaakov, and Esav says to his father, Ani Esav b'chayrecha, Ani bincha b'chayrecha Esav, and Yitzchak realizes that he's duped, and Esav lets out a geshrai, Vayitzak tzaka gedola umara ad ma'od, and he says, Tata, habracha achas hilacha avi, barcheni gam ani avi. Tata, do you have one bracha for me? And Yitzchak says, sorry, I've got nothing left. I have nothing left. Ba'oichal Mikael, I already ate everything. I gave everything to Yaakov Avinu. And Esav cries, and he lets out tears. And finally, Yitzchak Avinu says, okay, here's your bracha. Mishmane ha'aretz yeh moishavecha umital hashamayim eol. Your habitation will be the fat of the land. Says Rashi, Hashem already gave the entire world, Yitzchak already gave the entire world to Yaakov. He already gave Yaakov Borough Park, Flatbush, Williamsburg, Muncie, 5 towns, Cleveland, Ohio, everything. Lakewood, Lakewood. He already gave him everything. Queens, Jamaica Estates, Holliswood, Kew Garden Hills, Montreal, even Montreal. He already gave everything. Chicago. What? Now, Cedarhurst is an extension of Eretz Yisrael because it's the closest city to JFK. When Mashiach comes, the Jews of Cedarhurst will be the first to go because we're the closest community to JFK. Anyway, so Yitzchak Avinu already gave everything to Yaakov, but there's only one country he gives to Esav. And what is that? Zu Italia Shel Yavan, Italy. The one land Yitzchak gave to Esav is Italy. It's astounding. If you look at this beautiful country, what we're looking at is Birchas Yitzchak Avinu. This country is the blessing of Yitzchak. All the olives and the olive oil and the wine and the cheese, it's the blessing of Yitzchak Avinu. But let's ask ourselves, but didn't Yitzchak give everything to Yaakov? How was he able to give Italy to Esav? Comes the Rebbe Reb Heschel, the Rav of Krakow, the Rebbe of the Shach. Did I mention? Next trip, you could join us, Lag BaOmer. We're going to... No, I'm not doing Japan. Rabbi Akiba, by the way, Rabbi Akiva, I noticed that he spelled his name Akiba with a ba sound, with a dagesh. And I asked him why, and he said it's because the Shevet Sofer spelled it that way, and other... But I'll tell you the real reason. Because if you look in the writings of the Ben Yoyada and the Ramami Pano says, where does the name Akiva come from? Yesh kaina oilamai bir sha'achas. Bir sha'achas. So it's Akiba, not Akiva. That's why. Okay, I just thought I would mention that. Says the Rebbe Reb Heschel, Yitzchak Avinu is in a quandary. He's up against the wall. He gave the whole world to Yaakov Avinu. What could he possibly give Esav? And then Yitzchak had an einfall. He had a brilliant idea. There's one country that he didn't give Esav. There's one country, he didn't give Yaakov. And that's because there was one landmass that had not been created yet. And that was the country of Italy. Italy was Loi Bala Olam, because the Gemara says in Shabbos, what are the origins of Italy? Says the Gemara, on the day that Shlomo HaMelech married Bas Parai, Gavriel, the Malach Gavriel descended from Shamayim. The Noatz Kane B'yam V'ala B'Sirtain, a sandbank developed on the day that Shlomo married Bas Parai. V'alav Nivneh Krach Gadol Shel Roimi, and on that day Rome was built. Many people say Rome was not built in a day. No, Sheker V'Chazav. Rome was built in a day. Whatever the Umayis Ha'olam say, it's Ibcha Mistabra. It's the exact opposite. When they say Rome was not built in a day, Rome was the only city in the world that was ever built in a day. You heard it here first. Avir Torres, 2024. The Gemara continues. On the day Yeravam brought 2 golden calves, one in Beisa, one in Bedan, a small landmass was built. V'zehu Italia Shel Yavan. So Yitzchak was racking his brain. He already gave the whole world to Yaakov Avinu, but there's one country left that he was able to give to Esav, and that's because it was a country that didn't begin yet. So if you were to ask, on what day did the Churban start? It wasn't on the day the Romans destroyed the temple. The Churban began on the day that Shlomo HaMelech married Bas Parai. Yitzchak Avinu was a very smart man. He knew that if he was going to give Esav Rome, that meant Christianity, that meant the Crusades, that meant Galus, that meant persecution. And therefore Yitzchak understood the only remedy that Klal Yisrael could equip themselves to last the long and bitter Galus is, along with Mishmane Haaretz Yeh Moshavecha, is also not only the land that was given to Esav, but the Torah that came from Italy, the Torah Tavlin, the protection of Klal Yisrael, the Torah of the Ramchal, of the Chidah, of the printing press, of the tens of thousands of Svarim that were printed in this country, of the hundreds of Gedolim that lived in this country. Yitzchak Avinu knew that along with Mishmane Haaretz, along with Christianity, Yitzchak was Mevarech Klal Yisrael with the bracha of Mishmane Haaretz Yeh Moshavecha. He equipped us with all the Torah that came from this country. Ki mibari teitzei Torah udvar Hashem me'atarant. And therefore, Yitzchak Avinu gave us the protection of all the Torah that came from Italy. And just like the Golus began here in Rome, the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin Tzadik Chesam and Aleph, V'heicha Yasiv, where does Mashiach sit? Says the Gemara, Pischa de Karta, in the gates of the city. Which city? The Gemara doesn't say. Comes the Gra, and the Gra changes the Gersa. The Gra on the spot in the Hagois Hagra says, Nimchak Tevas de Karta V'nichtav b'tzidai deroimi. Mashiach awaits at the gates of Rome. This is where the Golus began, and this is where the Golus ends. We still have a few more hours. Be'ezus Hashem, hopefully while we're still here, we should hear Besura Toiva coming, Mikarta deroimi, and Emirtz Hashem, in the merit of us coming to this country to be ma'orer all the tzaddikim that, in my humble opinion, come from the bracha of Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu is the one who ultimately will argue to Hashem to bring the kates. He's the one who prepared us for it. May we all be zeichet to hear Besura Toiva that will first emanate from the gates of Rome and ultimately will be revealed in the great city of Tiberia with the coming of the Bias Goel Tzedek, B'mher v'yameinu, Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.